a lot of queer people, because we in a more accepting time, and I say that with a lot of reservations, but that people are queer people are more open or don't feel the need to necessarily go to queer only spaces, and that there's more mixing, as it were, in the nightlife space, and perhaps some queer people don't want to necessarily be only within queer spaces, and they're comfortable being, and they feel more accepted in sort of more mainstream social spaces. So that could be a part that could explain that. Another part, I think, is the online. I think a lot of the drive as a queer person to socialize is to meet other people, and so when you've got these online platforms, I think that diminishes your need or desire to go out. I just wanted to mention something that was, talking about the age again, and it just made me think back to when I started going clubbing, and this is back in the late 80s, early 90s, where it was a very different time for the whole of South Africa, but also for queer people. As a gay man, I didn't know any gay people until I started clubbing. I didn't know. Well, I'd met a couple of people that I thought might be gay, but I didn't know anyone or interact with anyone that spoke to me as a gay person, as a queer person. And so clubbing was my first experience of meeting queer people. And because of that as well, being in school, I completely hid myself in school on all kinds of levels. Socially, I didn't really interact with people other on a very superficial level. Um, I didn't play sports because being in a sports field put me at risk. Sports were always sort of male, female, and when as a queer man in a male sort of a sports context, I was at risk. So I avoided kind of being in those spaces. So for me, clubbing served the purpose of, I grew up in clubs. I discovered how to desire, how to flirt in clubs. I never had that opportunity when I was in school growing up, while my heterosexual counterparts did. So I think for a lot of us, we were kind of developmentally sort of backward in certain ways. So there was a lot of catching up to do, and the clubbing and the nightlife space was where we did that. That's where we grew up and had to catch up with everyone else in society. And also just physically as well. The nightclubs were the first place I got to express myself physically. I fell in love with dancing, and I would dance for hours and hours and hours. And that was one of the prime reasons why I went clubbing, was to dance. And so for the first time, I felt I was able to express myself physically with my body. And that was incredibly powerful. So yeah, I just thought that's really interesting in terms of that developmental, that age aspect of going clubbing. Yes, is the part about being older, but also about, as a young person, catching up with everyone else on experiences and developmental stages that you've missed out on.
I want to delve just a little bit on what Lerato raised, the point about children. And because I'd never thought about this actually. um, Part of the reason why a lot of heterosexual people withdraw from socializing, nightlife, and all of that is because they've become parents. But a lot of us kind of either don't become parents by choice or circumstance. And secondly, because there isn't actually a social push for us to become parents as queer people. So you are able to kind of go in and out of life without kids. And one says, oh, why aren't you having kids, and so forth. And then as a result, you're able to actually have a so-called longer self-life with the nightlife. But I just wonder then, does us then making a conscious decision to have kids, will that possibly, I don't know, almost devalue social, us being social? Because I don't think we've ever thought about ourselves socializing as parents, as queer people. Like, straight people plan their lives around kids. So if you don't have, I have a lot of straight friends and some of them are parents, and like, I can't see you on Saturday. Why? I have a child. And that's reason enough. And everyone just accepts that you have a child, you can't go out. And I'm like, find a babysitter. But anyway, that's me. So I just wonder then, if we were to start thinking of ourselves in that way, spurred on by what Lerato is suggesting, possibly because we are more forward thinking than our heterosexual counterparts, we might find a way of living with kids and socializing still. But I wonder then, in the context of right now, and I ask this to you because you've been in a relationship for a long time.
So yeah, that's a really interesting question. I mean, I think that would be a reality. I think if you are queer parents and you have kids, that's going to play a huge role in terms of how you socialize, how you go out, and what you do. I think a lot of queer spaces, we're talking about having kids in those spaces. The reality is that a lot of queer spaces, at least when I was going out, were not spaces that you would necessarily want to have kids in. And there's a lot of drugs, there's a lot of drinking. That was my experience, and that was the reality. And as a parent, I wouldn't want my kids to be in that space. And it's not a sort of a judgmental thing about it, but there's a safety element. That's the reality, that when you engage in those things, there's a risk, and that's part of the enjoyment to some extent, part of the fun. But I wouldn't want my kids to be in that kind of space. But that shouldn't be the only options for us, right? Yeah. There should be other options. And I think that's maybe what you're referring to. And I think that's perhaps where we need to kind of have a bit of vision and a bit of creativity and try and find different ways of socializing as queer people, as a community, than what we used to.
And having then said that, part of having children and families is an aspect of money. And for the longest time, at least since 1998, there's been this concept of queer people have have. And I wonder then as well if part of our framing or part of our thinking about this moving ahead of nightlife and spaces also includes thinking about the financial aspects of it. And what Carla spoke about right now is the financial reality or the economic reality. And I think specifically in South Africa, where we have, inequality, economic inequality, big unemployment, a possible 17% VAT rate, and all of those things. And those things don't affect us as queer people any less than they do our, heterosexual counterparts. So if straight people are poor, gay people are poor, because we all live in this country, and the economy in this country is not, it's a bit harsher to us because the people who make decisions on who to give money to, i.e. employment, look at you and then make a decision. But then ultimately, if the majority of the country is poor, we are part of the majority, we are also going to be poor. So part of the thinking around nightlife possibly might, need some thinking about what is the economic reality of the country, or what is the economic reality, at least, of the LGBTIAQ plus community. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think that, as you said, I think we are part of we're all part of the same economy. So, are you asking, is that affecting queer nightlife?
Can we, because I think where we are right now is accepting that what we view as nightlife is either not necessarily as desirable as it once was to most people. and we need to start reframing it or rethinking it at least. And if we are to include the fact that there are older people who still need to go out, there are people who are going to have kids, and we want more people to have kids, and we need to have spaces for all of those people. But we also need to start having spaces for people who are not wealthy, as someone said this morning, sent and gays. So how do we then start thinking about creating these spaces against the backdrop of the reality of being in South Africa and economically precarious?
I think we need to create those spaces. I mean, I'm a very firm believer in self-organizing. That if you see that there is something, there's a gap, something that you feel people need or want, go out and create that, make that space, and then you will see if that is what people want. So I would say let's create that. And there are ways of doing that. You don't necessarily need money, depending on what you want to do. Obviously, if you want to have a venue that is, mirrored and got all kinds of lasers and stuff like that, then you need money. But if you want to reimagine how you create social spaces, you have to think outside of those kind of traditional boxes about what a social space should look like. But let's create those spaces. As a community, we can do that. We do so much. Yeah.
I agree in part, but there's a part of me that's also in disagreement. And I say this because I've organized events. I once organized an event that was attended by 4 people. It's sad. But this takes me back to what I said when we initially started. We still have a culture of lesbians go to or at the very least, lesbians go to events organized by other lesbians. So if I were, as a gay man, to organize an event and say, I don't know, it's Lesbian Fridays, the lesbians would not come as soon as they find out that it's organized by a gay man. And if a lesbian were to organize an event and they said it's Gay Thursday, the moment the gays find out it's organized by a woman, they don't go. And I say this because I know a woman who organizes events, and she was like, I'm trying to get more gay men to come to my events. They don't come.
Yeah.
So how do we then, I suppose then the question is, how do we start changing our perceptions around going out for those of us who still want to go out before we even start creating events that cater to these various pockets? But how do we change our perceptions around these settings as they are right now?
I think that's the thing, is that you can create the space, but whether people come to it is another story, because again, it's about those perceptions. So I think it's not necessarily about, it's a chicken and egg situation. I mean, if you look at the pride events, for example, I mean, if you look at Soweto Pride, which I think for me is one of the most important and vital pride events in South Africa. Every year I go there and I get there early. I'm in the march. I participate in the march, and that march is pretty small. But come the end of the march, come 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, the space starts filling up. People come and they want to socialize. They want to and that's not a bad thing at all. That's a fantastic thing. It's important to have those spaces. But and then there's this sort of dynamic where activists are saying, but why are people not coming to our march? And it seems people, our community, we don't want to march. Even Johannesburg Pride, the big march, is still small compared to the people that come afterwards to socialize and drink and party. And so that, it speaks to what you're saying, is that we have these perceptions and we have these ideas of what it is that our community should want and what they do want. And those things are not the same thing necessarily. So there's a lot of analysis that needs to happen within our community. And unfortunately, you can't force someone to do something. You can educate, you can empower, you can inform, but if
take them to the well.
Yeah,
but unless you're offering them champagne, they might not drink. As we near the end of our chat, I suppose then it's important to ask where to from here, even though we've kind of started asking where to from here. And a part of where to from here is educating. I don't know how you're going to educate people to go out to the right places and party at the right places. Just put out a poster, come drink, right? But people will still not come. But I suppose the bigger question is, how do we start ensuring that people who organize, so the organizers of these prides, are listening and seeing? Because I think if people are not marching, you're also not listening, to the lack of people being present at the march. And I think Joburg Pride tried to play with us. They like, Pride gates open at 10, but we'll march at 2. And they think we'll get there at 10 and march at 2. No, we get there at 3 after the march, right? So how do we get organizers of these events to start listening and then giving us what we want, I suppose?
Well, I think the question is, what do we want?
It's not what do we want.
It's what, and I think that's the question at heart. I mean, that's the issue: is what do we want? What is it that we think we should want, and what is it that we want? And those are not the same things. So that people in this space have an idea, I'd imagine, of what pride should be and what the purpose is, and but that may not be what the broader queer community necessarily feels, and that's the reality that we have to face and kind of manage that and work through that, and change that, I think, as best we can. I mean, just for me, going back to social spaces and where do we go from here, I remember, I mean, I absolutely acknowledge the need for queer spaces and how important they are. And I've just spoken as me coming out as a young person, how important they were. But I also remember there was a time I mentioned when the sort of raves started in the early 90s. There was a period of about 2 years where they were very underground before they became these massive kind of commercialized horror shows. And for the space of a year or two, there were really these very hidden events where people of all sexualities, orientations, gender identities came together in a space that was really remarkably diverse, not so much racially, but within the sort of the sexual and gender space, there was that. And I remember that being one of the most liberating and incredible experiences of my life. I'll never forget that time, because I never felt so free and so safe as I did in those spaces. And I would love to see that kind of becoming a reality in some ways. I don't know if it can ever develop beyond that kind of small underground space, but I would love to see it be something like that.
I mean, part of that then means going back underground. And I don't think that's where I personally don't think that's where we should be going, but maybe that's where we should be thinking. Maybe closing the space might be the answer, maybe for a limited period. But again, I find that once spaces once we enjoy things, we want to stand on platforms and tell people, I went to this place and it's amazing, everyone must come. And I think that's how spaces became as public as they became. So the underground became mainstream because people were enjoying it. People of different sexualities were like, like straight women went to gay bars, like such a great time, I'm going to tell all my girls. And then they came and then everyone started going. And then so I wonder if it's actually possible to regress progressively, so to speak, so that we can then start having these spaces as the safe haven that we envision them to be. I saw a hand somewhere. Yes.
So this is a question, I think, to the whole space, because there's a lot of smart minds here, so I'm looking for an answer. So I came out in my early 20s while living in Cape Town as a white person, which means I briefly worked for the DA and did a lot of cocaine. And now I'm in my 30s and not working for the DA and really can't be doing cocaine anymore either. So I have, you know, in the energetic person I am, tried to take ownership of sobriety within queer spaces, understanding the role that drugs plays in underground queer spaces, which were also a tool and I guess then a tool that became a crutch for me to find my identity. Like Carla was saying, I was initially explored my gender identity as a drag king, and then it just fused, and I never got out of drag at one point. But I'm really struggling to reconcile being sober, spending time with queers, and it not feel like I'm going to a conference every weekend. And this is great. Like, I dig the space. Thank you, Nala, Norma. Thank you. But like, where can I go shake my ass and not be triggered by I see you two going to the bathroom? Because I had a problem, but I still love cocaine, guys. Like, so it's not like I can just be out there. So what does that look like? Because, you know, yeah, what does that look like?
Do you have organizers in the room? Because they're the ones to answer this question.
So I'm an organizer, and I've organized events in different cities. And I think maybe what is always missing is that we're actually at that age where we are the organizers, and we are at the age where we are supposed to be doing the things that we want. And so I think we're still thinking of ourselves as consumers and not actually like active, you know, members of our community. So for example, a lesbian book club, that is an idea, or a film club or whatever. I think there's just so many things, but also I think our community is fragmented and we're more online now than we were before. And so I think spaces don't mean that much to me, to us now, the physical spaces anyway. Because you mentioned about organizing an event and you had 4 people. I've had that before, but I feel like if you're doing it with...
It wasn't for 4 people, by the way.
No, I imagine. I imagine. But those 4 people that came out to that event mean something. And I think if you're doing it for the long run, the numbers don't matter. If there's 2, if there's 5, if there's 20, it doesn't matter. I've had events where there were 400 people. I've had events where there are 5 people. But I don't do it for the numbers. I do it for the community itself. So I think it's about each one of us thinking, oh, what can I do actually? And what can I organize? Can I do something in my kitchen? Can I do something in my living room? Can we go have a walk? You know, there's just so many things that we can do.
It's me again. Hi, I'm Carbon, for those who didn't catch my name. My pronouns are they, them, and I always have a lot of thoughts. So let's walk. Let's walk together. Essentially, what I'm hearing is that, like, you're the one you're waiting for, right? Because, oh, I want a book club that reads, what were we talking about? Danielle Steele, right? Then, like, guess what? You're waiting for yourself to be the organizer of the Danielle Steele book club, right? So you're the one you're waiting for. I don't think we should be discouraged by, oh, only 4 people showed up. Yeah, those are 4 people. And now you can connect as 5 people and make something happen there. I don't think we must think that popularity in numbers is the metric we must use. I think if we're going to form communities, we need to form meaningful connections. And sometimes it's easier when there's just 4 people to make a meaningful connection in 3 hours, you know, because there's not 100 personalities and 100 stories we have to juggle. But going back to this thing of like kids, I think about children because I'm a teacher. It's kind of my job. But the context of like queerness and kids, I think, needs to be understood in terms of the political climate we find ourselves in, with the rise of fascism and the rise of like Christian like fundamentalism, right? Because I think about, okay, I want to start like this, like a club system at my school, that each teacher must host a club, right? And so some teachers have hosted like a coloring in club, a reading club. someone hosted an Adulting 101 club. They changed the tire. It was amazing. But I genuinely, I wanted to form like a queer club, like the Americans call it like a gay straight alliance, you know, one of those like, let's just be gay and like hang out and like, you know, just be free to be queer, because when you're openly trans teacher, the queer kids gravitate to it. They find you eventually, right? And that always happens, and that always does happen. But I don't want them to just talk to me. Like I'm literally like 10 years their senior. Like I want them to talk to each other, but they don't know each other because they're like randomly coming to me at break, and I'm not gonna out them to the other kids, but I'm just like, you two need to hang out. So I'm like, the best way I thought of it is, okay, maybe my club should be like the Rainbow Club, you know, keep it vague. But at the same time, I'm fighting being like openly, like too openly trans, because to be queer and to work with kids in a world that's framing transness as pedophilia, I'm risking my entire job. Right? And like, look, I'm very litigious. I will sue people, but I don't want to, right? Like, I do have rights in South Africa on paper, but I don't want to do all of that. So it's like very precarious of me trying to navigate my transness. I've never actually said the word transgender. I just say, I like gender neutral language. Yeah, I use they. Like, I'm keeping it vague because those who know, right? And those who don't know, don't know. I put the rainbow flag, but like secretly, you know, like it's all of these kind of like hinting towards queerness, but like trying to show kids that you can like you can be gay, like it's fine, like you can do that. But how am I supposed to organize then queer like spaces that are friendly to kids? Because I care about that. I don't mind I will take that on. But then at the same time, then next thing people are gonna like, yeah, protest outside of my event where I'm like, let's do, I don't know, maybe we can do like for the 3-year-olds, we can do like coloring in, but then like Batman and Superman are in a gay relationship, like in the coloring in book. You get what I mean? Like there's so many ideas. I have lots of them, but again, like who are we fighting, and how organized are we in this fighting? We spoke vaguely about militarization earlier on, and I'm like, guys, the people who hate us are fucking organized, right? They fucking organized in how much they fucking hate us and how much they want to erase us. That like me in my own little classroom being gay sometimes is not enough, because I'm fighting institutions that want to erase queer kids and erase queer teachers so they can say we were never there, right? That's what we're fighting. So I'm like, right? That's like what's in my brain all the time, because I'm like, I want to create these places. I like kids, fine if you don't. I like hanging out with them. I think they're cool. But like, we need to be organized, like actually formally organized, because the enemies we are fighting are very organized. They are very powerful. They are very moneyed, and they're very systematic about how they're doing this. Okay, there's no mistake in the fact that they're associating transness with pedophilia. That is not a mistake. That is a strategic decision, and I am seeing it in my day-to-day job, like infiltrating our society. Okay, this is happening in America. You think it's over there? It's not. It's here. Because their money is here. We saw that with like we see it all the time. So guys, when are we like coming together? I know I want to shake my ass. I always want to shake my ass, guys. But can we also come together to speak strategy? Because like, yeah, if we want this future, guys, I think we have to get like really fucking organized, because our enemy is fucking organized.
Organized. We had a hand over here.
Just before I go to that hand, I just want to lift up Liz Shimwe. They did not introduce herself. She's a fantastic independent film curator. She has a platform called Recognition that specifically platforms African and diasporic films. And I just wanted to, because sometimes it's hard to give ourselves our own flowers. So I just wanted to lift that up.
Hello. I have a lot of thoughts about lots of different things. I think I'm going to make a soup inside my mouth. I'm just going to spit out certain portions of soup into the air, and you can take whatever looks tasty from that. Or from the air, from where it lands, from where it flies. Soup. My name's Huge Silly Toe. I just moved to South Africa recently, so I'm speaking from having worked in other cultural contexts. I'm quite lost here and still working out what it means to be who I am and make the things that I make in this place. But it's very nourishing for me to hear these kinds of conversations on that journey. I wanted to speak specifically to the points that were raised around drug-free, like drug and alcohol consumption and accessibility for kids and for older folks, and those questions of how to come together as more diverse groups, no, in terms of age, in terms of everything. To share something personal about me, I don't drink, I don't take drugs, and I never have. There's lots of things that people often find strange about me, but honestly, that's one of the things that causes the most shock. People are like, fuck, but you must have, one time. But no, I'm very, very happy for all of my dear friends who find great pleasure in whatever substances they find it in. There's no kind of puritanical view there. But it's never been a thing for me. And so by virtue of that, the events that I've organized have always been drug-free, alcohol-free things. And what I've noticed through that is that in those, I organize more kind of performance, experimental theater, live art kind of things. But those events have always been attended by kids and by older folks. And people have also said to me, it's good to be in a space like this because now I'm older, I can't drink like I used to. Or I can't be doing that anymore. And so, I just wanted to raise that as a kind of example of that can totally happen. And it's something we can do. I also was thinking in terms of this is a conversation about nightlife, but we've ultimately ended up just talking about life. And so this can happen at any time, in any place. And also, I wanted to kind of ask a couple of questions, I guess, in terms of if people are aware of spaces where that is already happening in Johannesburg. As someone who's new to the city, I'd love to find out. And if not, then I'd love to form part of a new collective or group who would be looking to create those kind of things. And I'd love to contribute my energy to that. So if anybody else would also like to do that, that would be wonderful.
Sorry, I didn't get your name, but I think you raised something that triggered a very beautiful memory where I was in a queer space. I think I was in Berlin, and they were modeling something that was very, I found very special around what safe spaces mean and how we think of safe spaces as not just being this tick box exercises, but even in the context of like fun and nightlife. Like, what does it look like to have, to model nightlife and looking at the principles of what informs safe spaces, and maybe we have an etiquette around taking our drugs so that those that are in recovery don't have to be triggered, right? So what does it look like to not confine some of the ways in which we are living our politics to workshop spaces or to, film screenings and the typical spaces where safety is a concern, but what does it mean to queer nightlife, right? In terms of bringing those principles around safe spaces to platforms that we wouldn't necessarily think about it. So you don't want to constrain someone's shaking their ass or how they shake their ass, but you also don't necessarily want to isolate yourself from the community, because the reality is that the community does use drugs, the community does drink alcohol, the community is sober, is in recovery, all of those good stuff. And yes, it's important to connect with like-minded folks. Like, we need Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous. Those serve their purposes, but we also need our spaces to shake our ass with each other in all our multifaceted sort of challenges and diversity. So maybe we can think about safe spaces as something that extends into our nightlife, so that we can think of etiquettes around how we maintain each other's safety at whatever stage of journeys, and also thinking about even harassment and how we make, those questions not taboo, right? They don't have to be devoid of. I don't want us to think about these really important things only in workshop spaces, but I also don't want us to isolate ourselves. I don't want to go to a sober festival but I want to party with sober people because sometimes I'm sober. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to look like an isolated experience, even as maybe a sober festival could be a great idea for sober people, but maybe the sober people and the drinking people, we all want to be together and we're in different stages. So I just was triggered around thinking about how do we queer nightlife and party cultures by bringing a lot of the work around safe spaces is a legacy of queers, right, in the feminist movement. Let's be real. And so how do we extend that into other spaces as we queer the nightlife? Thanks.
Hello. Yes. So, Mutlatsi, we're talking about aging, and this apparently starts happening around upwards of 33. In the queer community, then suddenly alarm bells start ringing about the trajectory that you're on. But I mean, one of the things that I also think about is that in terms of that sort of maybe not generational, but in some instances intergenerational, but just where there are certain kinds of age gaps, that it's also okay for us to pass on the space in terms of who occupies it. So for me, I came to my expression of my queer self in night club spaces and nighttime spaces, nightlife spaces. And then there came a time where I felt like, okay, you can have it now. And really, I mean, the point for me about it was all those things. It was about going to potentially find, somebody that I either wanted to be in a relationship or have sex with, or whatever the case might be, whatever was the interest for that night or that time. But as a person, my interest also changed over time, and the things that brought me enjoyment changed over time. And so now, in terms of the the visibility, I'm also queer in the supermarket, and I enjoy grocery shopping. And I sometimes go grocery shopping looking the way I look here. And children see me. And in terms of what nightlife and nighttime experiences look like for me now, I really love eating, and so that becomes like a social activity for me. And I believe that there is an importance in terms of intentionally characterizing and setting spaces up as queer. But on the other hand, I also believe it is important to be queer in all spaces, And so for me, I don't necessarily, besides the fact that clubbing specifically is not that much an interest of mine anymore. I don't think so much about what is a queer space and what is not, because where I am, it's always a queer space, So I think there's a kind of and a dialectic to hold here, that these things interact with each other, and that I perhaps have left in some ways the club scene to go to the supermarket scene. But I think in a lot of what we do in terms of generational shifts is that we see it as a relay. We do our part in particular times, and our roles shift and they change, and younger people come in and they do some of the work, and they get older and they shift and change into different spaces. But for me, at the end of it, is that we are supposed to be everywhere. Yeah.
Sorry, Mos, can I just give a comment? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
There's a lot of people talking. I'm loving it. Sorry, I just want to go back to I want to hold space for people who are in the closet. Okay. Louis, I love the idea of events going underground, right? but there are a lot of events that happen that are private, that nobody knows about at all. I had a friend, her name was Steph. She's still my friend somehow, but she's a trans woman, right? And she would, on Thursdays, more or less in the afternoon, she would have like get-togethers for cross-dressers and closeted trans women, you know, to do their thing, get dressed and go. What a lot of people don't know is like cross-dressers and closeted trans people, they like to do things in the day because they don't want their families to know what is cooking, their wives, their partners, you know, because if they do find out, they lose their jobs, all of that. That's now the price that comes with being in the closet. So I just want to hold space for, because a lot of us here are visibly queer and out and proud and alles, ne? But what about those people who cannot be here because of being in the closet? And then a second thing, speaking to the event organizers, there's a lot of emotional labor that goes into organizing events. We all know this. And I have personally burnt out very badly organizing a pride, for instance, because it would be me and maybe 2-3 other people doing all of the work. And we know this because we're the only ones who can actually pull the event through right to the end. It's no judgment on anybody else's character, but the work still needs to get done. So now we're faced with the situation. We've booked this beautiful event that we want to do in whichever form it comes, but there's the invisible price of emotional labor, financial resources, a whole lot of resources, mental health spoons, alles that you have to pay as an event organizer to get that event done at the end of the day. So that's just something, 2 things I wanted to hold space for. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do we have time for one last one?
Yeah.
I think this should be the last one.
Hi, everyone. My name is Relebogile Sotedi. I come from the organization called Forum for the Empowerment of Women. We plan Soweto Pride, and I just want to piggyback on what Carla's talking about. It's so taxing, and it's also very painful to get like only a few group of people singing and marching. And we do it deliberately in the townships because we want the people who are in the closet, the family members that come out, that are doing the laundry, going to buy the magwinyas, to see the people who are visible, proud, and gay. Marching is a political statement, and we can't just put it aside because it's not fashionable and it's not, you know, glamorous. And I wish young people understood that even to have these spaces because someone marched, it's because someone took that step and doing the mental and emotional labor of planning these events. So I know we want to have the events, but we also need to show up for the hard work that comes to even have the joy and the space. Thank you.
We need lesbian bars.
Lesbian bars.
Say that. Say that.
Thank you. Thank you. Before I wrap, Louis, closing remarks?
Closing remarks. I mean, I just love that this was so interactive and that people had so much input and so many questions and thoughts and ideas. And it's just been really, it's, you know, someone that's not really very active socially. It's kind of sparked all kinds of ideas within me. And again, speaking to people who organize things and put things on, I've been one of those people as well. And I also have burnt myself out in that process and faced the criticism of our community, who are very easy to judge and demand about what they expect and what, but they're not very, they're not there to actually help and to support and volunteer and be part of it. That's also reality. But I think for me, this has just been really exciting to spark new ideas and new possibilities. And I think that's maybe what we should take from this as a group is just let's kind of try reconceptualize what queer nightlife, queer social spaces are, and how can we make them places that are safe, that are enjoyable, that are joyful, and that are new and dynamic, and that can make change.
Right. Thank you. I think mine, as I close, is to say to the organizers, you now have access to each other. So you're all going to talk to each other, and then you're going to organize great spaces for us that involve us who intend on having kids, us who are nearing to 40, us who don't have partners, and us who don't drink, us who don't do certain types of drugs, and. I think the biggest thing out of this space is that you've been given, in essence, this is a great space, safe space to have conversations, express ourselves, our frustrations, our desires, our hopes and joys, etc. But there's also the underlying aspect of it being just a networking platform. So for everyone who wants to do something, I have access to, I think, about 30, 40 people who might want to help you do it. And I hope you guys do it and it becomes a success. And I will come and I will attend. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mutlatsi and Louis. That was a rousing conversation. It's gorgeous. And Mutlatsi, your moderation style, are you maybe like the funniest human I've ever met without really trying? Like, shady lady, but so fun. I love it. I'm obsessed. So it is mine to try to bring all of these threads in some kind of togetherness, which ironically is what my name means. Ha ha ha. But maybe before I do that, I really want to give a really big thank you to Nalaqaba and Nomapagate for this amazing event, first of all. But I think also modeling for us this kind of like collaborative effort in queer organizing because of how many we've heard from Maria from Bag Factory, we've heard from Lisette from British Council, we have the folks of This Is Audio, This Is Visual, we have the catering folks, we have Impebo Press of one of the panelists from the first engagement. So there's been such a reaching across and through, and I have met so many interesting minds and ideas through, I thought I know a lot about like who's queer and who's doing what in South Africa, and I clearly don't know shit. And thank you for that lesson of showing me who's doing what and bringing all of these people together. And like Mutlatsi said, I hope this is an opportunity that we actually reach for one another. Because what Lisa was speaking to, I mean, we both were based in Brussels at a certain moment. She's still based there. And there is the possibility of collaboration there because the state makes that possible. And unfortunately, the state doesn't encourage us to collaborate in that way here. In fact, it puts us in competition against one another, right? So there is such an open-hearted generosity that is being shown in just the cross collaboration with organizations, because in fact, the state does not make that an easy thing for you to do. And if you put in an application that, oh, in fact, I have this many partners, their argumentation is, well, then you don't need money, right? So I just want to lift that work that you've done up, and it's all the work that you never see that Carla was talking about, you pulling this thing until the end of the finish line, but it's a finish line that no one sees you at, So I want to lift that up because it's not nothing. And if we can get a round of applause once again for Noma and Nana. So as I did in the past two sessions, I tried to create some kind of a poetic wrap-up. I used this exercise by Kaveh Akbar, who's this Iranian-American poet and writer, amazing. He does an exercise where he basically invites people to take poetry collections and collect words from the poetry collection. So you just like flip through the poetry collection, any word that like takes your attention, you write it down in a list, and then your job is to make that one cohesive body of language. And I've taken that exercise and tried to take the language that I've been hearing and find a way to bring all of those languages together. And this is the result. Into the womb of the night, we send our beloved Imam Muhsin Hendricks, remembering always that death is only a door. On our knees, we beg Allah, have mercy, while our tongues take sacrament of liquor, of the salt of sweat, the curd of cum, in graffiti toilet stalls, places of sex for some, places of death for others. Have mercy. From Chatsworth to Makaza, Makaza to Gaza, Nyobeni Tavern is Pulse nightclub, but the life of the night is its own door with its own disastrous effects. On a dance floor crowded by bass and spirits, we invoke a God who entreats us. You are called to be beautiful, yet we are arrested in a captured queer legibility that is dying to be seen, fodder for slaughter, a concerning legacy that reminds us that freedom is indeed fragile. Zugiswa says, I don't believe in closets and I don't believe in cages. But I fear that closets and cages believe in us. I fall to my knees at night and pray to a God that I'm not sure can hear me. Nyaguva Bapans. As Imam Hendrik's bones rattle in their coffin, the prayer, the prayer, the prayer, the prayer. Please, God, keep him safe. Please, God, let her make it home. Please, God, if you must break my heart, then just break me entire. I am a wider gulf of grief, prostrating myself before the open door of this graveyard country. I would never wish myself upon the kids of today. I am a specter. I am a night wolf. I stalk the shadows looking for a door that will allow me to disappear, and then maybe God can remove the decorated dildos in her ears to hear all of this weeping under his feet. And with that, I want to invite Unoma. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'll try and stand because I'm always anxious. I will first read and then I'll speak from my heart. Ukupano, we literally met 2-3 weeks ago. We met on camera. First thing I noticed were the dimples. But today I appreciate the legs. The spirit, the mind, and the soul. But Kupano is they, them, a South African performance artist, writer, educator, and cultural worker. Their debut poetry collection, Jesus Thesis and Other Critical Fabulations, was released through Uhlanga Press in 2020. Shortlisted for the National Institute for Humanities and Social Sciences Award for Best Fiction Poetry, and later translated into German through Agorno Verlag in 2023. They were a co-founding director of the publication and performance platform Anybody Zine, and a curator at Dramaturge at Kenston Centrum Verneuil in Kent. I apologize for that, there's no Afrikaans in me. But this was in Belgium 2019 until 2023. Their writing has been published in Arthrop Online Magazine, the Mail and Guardian newspaper, Indent, The Body, and the Performative Journal, Recto Verso, Contemporary and 2035 Africa, an anthology of contemporary poetry, Bubblegum Club, and elsewhere. That's Kupano on paper. But the initial idea is that we needed a spirit, a body, a soul, someone that would hold the sessions. I'm socially awkward. It would not have been possible. And between Nala and I, Nala insisted, and I'm thankful for that. So Kupano, you have taken us to church on 3 consecutive Saturdays. That smile, those dimples. But you dropped in all these tiny things, the opening prayer, you know, the poetry at the end, and just your patience and generosity also with us in sharing and helping us rethink and also imagine the space differently. Yanga wenza njalo nakwabanye. Thank you so much, Nala. Of course, we dream of a future where we give away checks, but we've got flowers today and lots of love. I know we've been saying thank you to the British Council, but I want to single out Uveki Ligona. We started with them about 2 months ago doing this amazing work, and we also did a shout out in one of our sessions. But Lisedi Shubani, who has been holding our hand, the Monday check-ins, and both of them, they've been so generous. No, you guys, you sound like you've got this. Looks good, we're good. It never felt like we were reporting. It never felt like we were being watched. It never felt that we were doubted. In fact, we wanted to do so much more and felt encouraged to just dream out loud and think with you. And these are the partnerships that we need, the partnerships that don't limit us. And we are so, so proud. And that's why we even said it, you know, supported by British Council. We trying to change also the language of sponsorship and all these other things. But the humans you are, thank you. Thank you for entrusting us with this. Maria has done an amazing, amazing job in thanking a lot of the people in the team. But I want to thank Nala. Nala, I just want to start. Do you see the beautiful posters we have? Have you seen us online? Have you seen our water? Have you grabbed the zines? Tristan is also in the room. Huge shout out. These were ideas, thoughts, excerpts from poetry, from sessions earlier on. This is the second version. Please grab these at the back, also in the wall. Amazing labor of love. I am not online. WhatsApp is the best thing that I have. And so I've been leaning a lot on Nala and the team. Have you seen our program? Have you seen how amazing it is? The detail, the folding, everything else. Nala. I'm thankful for your patience. Nala is more structured, more organized than I am. I move with the spirit, and I've been irritating and being moved by the spirit. But thank you for your patience. Thank you for the difficult conversations and the confrontations. But I'm thankful for the journey and in learning what it means to work together. We've never worked together. We're not even friends. Well, now we are. Okay, that came out wrong. What I'm trying to say is it started as a professional relationship, and there's a lot of learning we've had to do along the way. Personalities, I wake up late and so forth. But I'm so thankful. Huge shout out to Unala. I also want to thank the different people that have been part of this. I single out Danai Mubota because in Querying the Shelf, she's one of the people that stayed behind. We have one of her books through Impepo Press. I was too much of a wimp. I pulled out a love letter from many, many moons ago, and Gupano was so generous in that session. If you were too shy for a piece or so, and they read it out loud, I went home and I cried like a baby afterwards. I'm also thankful for the strangers we've met in person. I'm singling out Kim because Kim and Tiffany have this book, and I met Kim for the first time in the shelf and walked through and says, I didn't do any RSVPs, coming for the next few ones. And I was like, are you Kim Kim? Are you Kim Kim? But there are many Kims in this room, the faces we've seen in the consecutive Saturdays that I've never seen before, that I do not know. I've also been lucky that I saw some of my friends I haven't seen in 7 or 10 years. People who just came through to these sessions and who wanted to be here in person. There's an entire audience in Cape Town and Durban that are jealous that we've had these only here in Johannesburg. But I always say Joburg is the love of my life. It's all I know in thinking queer and thinking freedom and thinking Black. So we have these books, and we will keep them until we sell them out, because this was the promise in pushing the queer literary scholarship, the work that we do. But I want to say this has been a build-up and experimental work for us. The British Council, essentially, the mandate was to host the British 5 Films for Freedom. And we'll be doing that mid-March, one in Johannesburg, Durban, and Cape Town. So we thought about hitting the metros in that sense. But it was so important for us to start with these conversations because we wanted to also create spaces. Urban loneliness is an issue, not just for queers. We've become so isolated post-COVID, and we also don't know how to have conversations with each other and connect anymore. And part of insisting that these are public dialogues, that we need them, not just in the academy, not only in political movements. And this is why also today's session was so important. It's easy to trace the queer literary scholarship in the past 3 decades, and we can even look at it in terms of how it has expanded. It's also easy to talk about the gallery and the work that we've seen in the continent, especially in Southern West and Eastern Africa. But the streets was something that was a bit of difficult to think through, but we wanted to appreciate alternative forms, if you like, of community building. As we've all heard here, I can relate to what Louis said when I was 19, first year, University of Johannesburg. The Forum for the Empowerment of Women, which is few, used to host what they called, what is it? Fridays at Few. And these were social spaces where you would meet all the gays. And I've always had dreadlocks. And back then, I used to wear baggy side pockets, bongo dreads, and all of that, because to be queer meant to be butch and masculine presenting and all of that. But it is through those spaces that has always been important for me, to make the conversations public, to make them accessible, to create some forms that are not so rigid and prescriptive in how we think and how we feel. But it's also through the creatives. As a social researcher, a lot of my work is on human rights violations and violence and so forth. It's hard to translate sometimes what the pain is. And it's been a joy to watch Mawe's work, for example, or even the poetry over the years, and saying, how do we also holistically reflect on our experiences? But a huge shout out, Dalsy could not make it today because of family issues. But the reason that, we thought, I'm sure Nali thought about it more than I did, but we thought about each person we invited. And Udalsi is one of the key minds when we think about the urban spaces created for lesbians in the city. Udalsi, and there were 4 of them, but I remember Udalsi, again at 19, and this was Melville, and they used to host the Friends of Open Closet, and it would move across different spaces in the city. Of course, we harassed each other. You're coming out of a bathroom and someone forces you back in and kisses you. Not sure if you're flattered or violated. But these were the spaces that we were thinking through in terms of visibility. Of course, there was a lot of drinking and cheating that happened in those. But again, as Louis shared with us, part of it was finding ourselves as messy as we were. Hopefully, we've learned and we've grown in those ways. Usnowi also could not join us because of some personal reasons, but we had imagined that Usnowi has been one of the most generous sex workers. I say that openly because that's their job and they pride themselves in it, and they also do a lot of advocacy. And we wanted particularly to hear her voice as a trans woman working in that particular field in terms of what visibility looks like and what is the concept of the streets for them through a queer lens. So we've missed their voices, but their work continues, and we continue to be inspired by many of them. So thank you to Zetu. I know they're now offline. Zetu at some point said, no, I'm not around. I'm in Germany, we won't be able to do this, but it was so important that we also close off with Uzetu, given the work that they've done, scholarship, organizing, advocacy, in also troubling this category of the streets. Kala, I've missed some meetings, and I'm glad you didn't single me out on that one. But Kala is also one of the interesting voices, never shy to self-critique and be mindful of also her situatedness. I can go on and go on about Umawetu. We've been fighting, I think, for the past 13 years about the Simon Goli question, to say, why was I part of organizing the Simon Goli Memorial Lecture, and not having gay men own Simon Goli as a Black working class boy from the Vaal. So to have Mawe today do an entire experiment, I'm happy that you're owning Simon back into the publics. And it's not a Black lesbian behind him this time around, nor a white gay man from abroad. Louis, I've always been a fan of your work. Intimidated by you while I was working it out in Pretoria. But you've always been a chilled guy, intimidated because of your amazing mind and how you've also captured the work over the years. I only began to know of the Afrikaner underground clubs doing research on men who have sex with men in Southern Africa. I think the research was unethical, but I defended it at the time. We tested queers when they're walking into the club for HIV and AIDS. That was our position, because we wanted to understand whether, in terms of the prevalence, people were aware of it. It was a nightmare when people tested positive. It was hard to hold, and at some point the research had to stop. But that meant going to Pretoria every second Saturday, going to the clubs, interviewing people, and doing this work. And I don't have Afrikaans, so I only had the body language and the music and the and the visuals to just understand what that was. And part of inviting Louis to this conversation was to tap into that rich history, because Louis is always behind the scenes, taking pictures, coordinating the narratives and all of that. But there's a wealth of knowledge in what Louis has also documented, not just in terms of the northern parts of Gauteng, but also across the country. Mutladzi is a very multifaceted, interesting person, legal mind, sassy queer, and always asking the very difficult questions. But what I like about him, and also his spirit and how We thought about his moderation, the gentle confrontations and the humor. I think that's what I enjoy the most. Even if Akpogla is telling you off, you know, you laugh at yourself and then afterwards be like, oh my gosh, I've just been read. But to each of you for making time, it's not easy to leave your house on a Saturday and just spend a day. And this has been our third and last. But like I said, mid-March, we will be looking at now querying the lens, querying the screen, which will be through the film screenings. And we do encourage others to do similar work, to our family members, our loved ones, our exes. Love continues to grow in different forms. A big shout out to Uendi and Wandi from the art. The audio is visual. A big shout out to Mentis Bitten Studio. I mean, I'm supposed to be losing 10 kgs by June. It's not happening. I've missed the mark in these 2 months. But thank you for the food. The fruits for me have been quite a consistent thing that I appreciate throughout the day, and just making sure that we have food and that's enough for people. And it's not just food, but it's also, you know, what people also enjoy. A huge shout out to Smile at the back. I know how irritating we've been in the mornings and the check-ins. Thank you for your patience in holding us through. Ryan, also our photographer, who's been taking amazing pictures. So this has been a collective effort. I mean, it goes without saying, Maria, for, you know, hosting us at the Back Factory, in terms of also realizing the dream that Nala and I had in thinking this through, and also allowing us that independence and freedom. But honestly, to each of you who made the time, I really appreciate it, and thank you. And I hope we continue to have more public dialogues. I do believe in wine and gin. So don't hold back in your events, but yes, to curating more safer spaces. And thank you so much. I'm not sure if there's anyone I've forgotten, Nala, but.
Zintle, our comms coordinator, who's had to step out early. Wanda, Ngobile, Naledi, who couldn't be with us today, but like quite literally, this just could not have happened without them. So thank you so much. Thank you.